Hi everyone, this is Christy Burcham with Scissortail Studio, and in this video we're going to learn how to digitize a monogram medallion with an applique. As you can see on this towel project, the monogram in the center is on an applique medallion, which allows us to put this beautiful monogram onto a fairly busy fabric where it might not normally show up. I really love this scallop look, and I'd seen it a lot in some ready-made items and wanted to recreate it with my embroidery software. Now, the instructions for the project itself for this towel can be found on my blog, which is scissortailstudio.com. So let's take a look at how to digitize this design. We will be using the Bernina embroidery software. This is version 6. The steps are going to be very similar for most digitizing type softwares, but we will probably be looking at some tools that are unique to the Bernina software. All of the things we're doing here in Bernina version 6 are still available in version 7 for those of you who have upgraded. So let's take a look at how we're going to create this. Because this is an applique, we could use our applique, an automatic applique tool, to create the steps in the applique, which is like the pieces that do our placement, that do our tack down, and do our cover stitch. If we use an automatic applique tool, which in the Bernina software is this tool right here called Our Applique, then it will automatically make those steps for us. However, there's a couple reasons that we're actually going to manually digitize this applique and put those steps in ourselves. One of them is that we want to create a circle, and I want to use the circle tool to create that circle. When I'm using the Auto Applique, I don't have the circle tool. Now you can make a perfect circle using the Auto Applique tool, but I just really like to use the circle tool. I think it makes things faster. Also, this scallop edge is not a type that we can choose for a cover stitch using the Auto Applique, and you'll see as we create this why we need to do this manually. So let's go through the steps. The first thing we're going to do is to make a circle, and we'll use the circle tool for that. And the first piece that we need to create is the placement stitch. This is the stitch that will stitch first onto our fabric and tell us where we need to place our applique. So that'll be the first thing we create. So we'll select our circle tool. Now we need to change the stitch type to an outline because this placement line is just going to be a single stitch. So we'll choose outline here, and we'll use single, which is defaulted to single for me, but that will be our placement stitch. So we want to make that circle. We're going to click once in the center of the hoop, and I'm going to drag this out until this is about the size I want it to be. And I'm making a circle that is about 2.6 inches, so I'm making it about 1.3 inches in the radius here. So I'm going to set that. And I only need to click once because I want a perfect circle. So now I just touch enter, and that will finish the dimensions for me and make a perfect circle. So now we have our 2.6 inch in diameter circle. And that is our placement line. Now we want to do the next step, which is going to be the cut line. If you were doing a cut in place applique, which is what I like to do, it's my favorite, we're actually trimming the fabric in the embroidery hoop, then you need a cut line. If you are going to be pre-cutting your applique using a pattern, you do not need the cut line, so you can skip this step. However, if you just want to make a practice of always having that cut line, it's not going to hurt you if you're using the placement line with the applique. If you're pre-cutting your appliques, you can always just go ahead and stitch the cut line. It won't hurt anything. So to create the cut line, I just want to use the exact same circle, and it's going to be in the exact same position. It's also going to be a single stitch. So all I need to do is to copy this and paste it right on top of itself. And now it stitches that second circle right on top of itself. However, I need to do one more step, and that is to change the color. So we just started out with the default color number 1, and I'm going to just switch to default color number 2 so that we have a separate color change that will tell the machine to stop in between. I'm not really going to stitch this with purple and blue, but I want the machine to stop. So I'm just changing to arbitrary color so that it will tell the machine to stop, so I'll know my steps. So So the first one was our placement stitch, the second one is our cut line. That's what we'll actually cut around when we go to stitch the applique design. Now the third color change that we need is what we call a tack down. And what the tack down is it loosely stitches over the edge of our applique to hold it in place before we do the actual satin stitch. This just does a couple things for you. One, it helps you make sure that your placement is really good and you can see that everything is in place, and if you need to make an adjustment, you still have a chance to put another piece of applique on there because that tack down is going to be fairly loose. You could cut it out if you had to, if your applique wasn't perfectly placed. The next thing that it does is it just holds down the edge of the fabric so that when you do the satin stitch you get a nice smooth edge over the applique. So we want to create that tack down, and the tack down is going to be a zigzag. So we're going to again copy and paste. We've got that exact same circle, but we want to again change the color so that we have a color change. And for this third one, we tack down, we want this to be a satin. We actually want it to be a zigzag, but we're going to start with a satin, and then we are going to right click it to get the object properties, and we want to change the stitch satin type to manual. And the reason we do that is we want to change the stitch spacing, and the stitch spacing is how close or far apart those satin stitches are together. So the bigger the spacing, the more like a zigzag it's going to look as opposed to a satin stitch. So for our basic, 0.4 is what we will cover it with. A tack down, a good tack down size for a 0.4 millimeter stitch spacing would be like a 2 millimeter. So there's 2 millimeters in between each zigzag. I also like to make the satin width just a little bit narrower. So if 0.1, if 1/10 of an inch is going to be the width of my actual cover stitch satin, I like to bring this down just a little bit, just a hair, to about 0.08, so that that tack down will not show. There's no chance of it peeking through the satin stitch. Okay, now we've got that the way we want it. We'll click OK, and you can now see that tack down in place. So now we've got our first three. We can open up our color film here and see we've got our placement, our cut line, and our tack down. Now we are ready to do the cover stitch. So we will again select just that top circle. We're going to copy it. We are going to paste it. We're going to change the color so that we're adding another color change, as you can see here in the color film. And now we'll right click that satin and put it back to those basic settings. We want to again be manual, and the stitch spacing is 0.4. The satin width is 0.1. And we will click apply and OK, and now we have that beautiful satin stitch. Okay, so now that we have this satin stitch, we want to add that pretty little scallop around the outside of it. And to do that, we're going to use the pattern run, and we will select one of our straight stitch circles to copy. So either one of them, it doesn't matter. You want to select from your color film, and then we want to copy that, and we want to paste it. And now we're going to change this to a pattern run. Now when we select pattern run, it's going to default to this little baby buggy pattern, but we will right click and change this pattern set. So the pattern set that is the default is children, but if we click select, you can see there are tons of these patterns to choose from. And under the home deck, stitch number 426 is the one we want. And when we click apply and OK, you can see we get that beautiful scalloped edge. Now we actually want this scalloped edge to be the same color as our satin stitch cover, so we'll change that color to yellow. And that looks pretty good. That's basically the look we're looking for, but before we stitch this out, we want to look at this in artistic view. And when I zoom in on this, you can see that we actually want this satin to be on top of the scallop, because that scallop doesn't have that pretty smooth edge, and it really wouldn't cover the applique without the satin. So we need the satin there, but we want it on the outside. This is a really easy fix. We just need to select the satin stitch, and we want to select just the satin stitch, If you have trouble getting that satin stitch selected, try to select the edge of that satin stitch as opposed to trying to click the middle of it. When you click the middle of it, you end up clicking the edge of the scallop. So if you click along the edge of the satin stitch, you're more likely to grab it. Now that we have that selected, we actually want that to stitch very last. So we're going to click Arrange and Sequence to End. And that will set that satin stitch to the very end. If we choose our artistic view, we can see how that looks, and that looks great. Now our very last step is to add our applique, to add our letter to our monogram. You can add your letter in your embroidery machine if you want to, so you could go ahead and send this to your machine and then use one of your built-in letters to put into the center of this, but we're going to add one right from the software. So I simply select the lettering, click inside my circle, and I'm going to use the letter A and touch Enter. Now I'm going to choose a different font here, and because I'm using some chevron fabric and this pretty scalloped edge, I really think it has a nice preppy look to it. So I want to choose a font that I think also has a really good preppy look to it. You could do a really scrolly preppy letter, or you could do this one I like is the Centurion font, which is just a nice serif font. Now we'll make this bigger and put it in the center. You could use the centering tools here. You have some alignment tools that allow you to perfectly align objects to each other. When I'm doing a letter like this, a lot of times I will manually just visually center it, because what I find is sometimes the actual physical center of the design doesn't really look centered, just based on the way that the letter is drawn, depending on how the serifs are and the loops are. Sometimes you actually don't really want it to be perfectly centered, you just want it to look like it's centered. You want it to be pleasing to the eye. So you just adjust that till you're happy with the placement of your letter. And I want to make sure my letter is last, so I'm just double checking the order of sewing here, and that letter does stitch very last. Now we're ready to save this and send it to our machine. If we want to print a pattern, we can print out one of these colors. We could actually print that, and we've got a tutorial on my blog on how you can do that, how you can print a template from your embroidery software if you want to pre-cut your applique piece. So check out the instructions for the towel on our website, which is scissortailstudio.com, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave us one in the question box below, or leave a comment on my blog at scissortailstudio.com, or you can drop us an email at Christy, CHRISTY, at scissortailstudio.com. Thanks for listening.